Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite business acronyms, which confuses a lot of people: EBITDA. So, really, if you're a founder or a leader, you've probably heard this term at least a few times: EBITDA. Setting aside the fact that lots of people get confused about how to pronounce it. Is it EBITDA? Is it EBITDA? Is it EBITDA? Many founders and leaders aren't entirely sure what it actually is, where it differs from profit margin, and why they actually need to care about it. Okay, let's at least break it down into what it stands for. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Just a fun acronym. And essentially, in its simplest form, it's another way of measuring an organization's profitability. So if your company uses GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, you're likely familiar with gross profit and net income or net profit. And gross profit essentially shows how much profit or revenue you had after all COGS, cost of goods sold, are removed. The higher your COGS, the lower your gross profit. Net profit shows precisely how much profit you had after all expenses were removed. And before getting into EBITDA a little bit more, I will say it is a good practice to follow GAAP. It makes things a lot easier down the line, especially as you think about growth and as you think about future optionality, because at the end of the day, this is what everyone's going to come back to. However, it is really important to think about EBITDA because gross profit and net profit are incredibly important as you think about the day-to-day operations of your business. But EBITDA is critical as you think about the overall value of your enterprise, especially if you're beginning to think about your succession plan or your exit plan. And if you decide to pursue outside investment or M&A, the value of your organization will ultimately be tied to your EBITDA because a typical valuation is a multiple of your EBITDA. So let's take a really quick example. Let's say your EBITDA is $3 million. And you fall into a category of valuation where you might have a multiple of anywhere from 6x to 8x. That means that your company could be valued at between 18 million and 24 million. You see what I'm saying? $3 million in EBITDA, 6x to 8x. So anywhere from 18 million to 24 million. And if you're starting to talk about EBITDA for the first time, you should also know there are a few different ways that people might talk about EBITDA and related costs. You might hear things thrown around like unadjusted versus unadjusted EBITDA, or above the line versus below the line costs. They're all related. If you're considering an external valuation, you'll likely explore what are commonly known as adjustments or add backs to EBITDA. They can include one-off costs or expenses, as well as some R&D adjustments. So the bottom line here is it's good to know what your EBITDA is and to be familiar with it, especially if you're thinking about a transition or an exit strategy. And just to be clear, it doesn't take the place of net income and profit margin, but I do recommend that you have it tracked to avoid having to retrofit it later. So if you have other questions about this really fun acronym, or you just want to say it a lot of times in conversation and plug in a little bit more of what it actually looks like, how it's relevant to your organization, or how you start to think about it, drop me a comment, shoot me a note. I'd love to talk further, as well as any of these other fun acronyms that come up.